So I was actually asked by Jinabhadra to give this talk, not only on beauty and myth, but to give it in terms of the place where I happen to live, which is at Seal Rocks, about 3.5 hours north of Sydney. So you're going to be learning a little bit about me. I can't divorce myself from this place. A little bit about this place, and hopefully we'll be able to get a better understanding of how I understand myth and beauty. So one of my earliest memories, because there are many, and they're a bit mixed up about this place, but one of my earliest memories about this place is the long road from Newcastle, which is where I was born, to Seal Rocks in an old Oldsmobile, winding road that climbed up into the mountains and then came back down into Bulahdelah and then turned into a gravel road, which was so badly made and sort of made its way across until finally arriving at Seal Rocks. But I remember being sick 3 times on that trip because of the fumes coming through the floor of this old Oldsmobile that my father was driving. And then at a certain stage, about 3/4 of an hour, we were on this gravel sort of hill, and the thing got the motor boiled over, and he had no water, so he had to walk down into a rainforest gully to find water in the creek below, and then we finally arrived. So after being sick and all of that, this terrible journey seemed so long, and it was long, even from Newcastle back then. It was 3 or 4 hours, but the arrival was so much worth it. To arrive coming down a steep hill, down immediately watching the sea and the beach in front, and then turning and driving along the beachfront, 2 beaches, driving right next to the water along the beachfront, and finally arriving at the old shack, the little gun barrel shack, which was my family's holiday place at that time. No electricity, just tilly lamps and later gas lamps, no town water, just tanks, an old dunny can for the toilet, not even a septic tank. But it was a magical place for me. It was a beautiful place. It was surrounded, and still is, by forest right down to the back door. There's a view, and as I'm talking about the view, just sort of out through there is this amazing view of the sea. And it goes for many miles up the coast, and I can see the coastline receding miles and miles and miles away. So looking out to the ocean, but also up to the coast with many beaches receding into the distance. So for my parents, this was a place of escape. My father in particular loved it as a fishing. He loved fishing. And for him, who coming from his hard job, hard slog in Newcastle, coming here, it must have been a wonderful, wonderful escape. But for me, especially, and with my brother, Neil, it was just magical. This flora and fauna everywhere, the sun and the sea, running barefoot and free, just beautiful. So I'm going to just give a few slides just to give a taste. It's not really about the slides, but let me just share some with you. Okay, Shannon, you need to move the people out of the way. Shannon? Remember?
Yes, I'm here. We have a clear screen here, so you just go ahead and pop the slides on.
Oh, okay.
Maybe your screen is showing us, but we can't see
it. That's fair enough. Not a problem.
Okay.
You can't see anything?
Just your pictures.
Okay, good. So the first view is the view that I have out of my window here. Pretty much like this right now, just fairly calm. The island to the right, looking up the coast into the distance. the beach just below me. Same view, different time of day. And you can see now there's a few waves down there. Bit of difference in the way the bay is sort of reacting to the weather. But you can see, understand why this is such a special place. Looking now off to the other direction, to the left. A bit later in the day, different sunset. So this isn't taken from my place, but that's the same island that we were looking at a moment ago. But here we have a different sort of weather, massive waves smashing through, even to the point where they sometimes come up over that island. So very changeable. So the birds, for me, such an important part of my life here at Seal Rocks. And the ones that take preeminence is the butcherbird there, black and white, sitting up there. But notice just how easily these different birds are there with each other. And they form a major part of my life here at Seal Rocks. And I'll talk a little bit about that at a later stage. More birds. These two are just, there are many rainbow lorikeets, but these two think that they own the place and they just keep the others off. They fight them off. They were here this morning. They had their seed. An odd couple, a rainbow lorikeet. Not a rainbow lorikeet, excuse me, an eastern rosella, the smaller one at the back, and a crimson rosella at the front. And they've just formed a pair, these two, and they're everywhere together. They're the only two in the place. It's like they're just sort of somehow or other, they've ended up here because it's not their normal territory, and they hang together. A butcher bird flying out towards food. My little niece, grandniece there, offering cheese. That's what we feed the butcher birds. They're not allowed to be carnivores here, even though they love to be carnivores, but cheese, they absolutely adore that. And the kookaburra in the background isn't allowed to have the cheese because they get a bit strange and naughty with the kookaburras when they get fed. So butcher birds, yes, but kookaburras, no. Another visitor. We get quite a few goannas through wandering across the deck here. But this one in particular just seemed to want to kind of say a much closer hello. And then just finally, a little bit of an echo of the garden, because I love my garden and it's really rather lovely. But also the Buddha, in this case, it's Amitabha. It's almost a life-sized statue of Amitabha, and he looks out towards the west, which was that view, the third picture I showed you with the sunset and the really sort of rich sunset. So Amitabha sits there and looks out to the west. Okay, so that's my slideshow, just to give you a little bit of a taste. So look, I went on a mythic context retreat as part of my ordination training in 2008. It's the only retreat I've done outside of Australia, at Padmaloka in the UK. And this mythic context retreat turned out to be just twice a day doing the prostration practice, the refuge tree and prostration practice, which is quite a lot of exercise for those of you who know about it. But it's basically a way of sort of visualizing and doing bowing and doing obeisance to the refuge tree of our movement. And the Shakyamuni Buddha is at the heart of that refuge tree. So I got this real connection to the refuge tree and to the way that it represents the myth of our practice and our order. All of the teachers of the past, the teachers of the present, the bodhisattvas, the jinnas, the Buddhas of the past, the Buddhas of the present, all of the Dharma texts, Vajrasattva at the very top, and all surrounded by gods and goddesses and darkinis and darkas, all sort of pouring down obeisance onto the refuge tree. And I thought I'd read just a poem that says something about the myth, or the sense of the myth of the refuge tree as it worked on me in that place. So I just called it Refuge Tree, Padmaloka, July 2008. Only this adamantine firmament, impossible midnight, undreamt heights emerge, a dreadful music, thunderbolt urge, the note sounds deepening awe. Who are these, poised above moon-washed oceans, buoyed upon petals of limpid calm, soaring aloft and beyond that timeless chasm? Paths of heroes, woven from nothing in dewdrop clarity. Depths, touched, quickened, awake. The morning sun, your smile of peace, open, free of all confection. Heart of this age-old mandala, Shakyamuni, at your feet I bow. Your silence, my silence, a single thread unravels, an unfolding tale of such soft simplicity, sheathed in folds of tears and laughter. Wings of tenderness reach out. Only this, rising, soaring, exultant, upward roaring brilliance, dragon fire. I never thought really that I would have that sort of a response to the refuge tree, but a couple of weeks of prostration twice daily and really reflecting deeply and working hard to get a sense of and get into and get a sort of a feeling for this tree was really important, and it actually made the myth come alive and the beauty of the tree become alive for me. So beauty, myth, it's not just about sitting back and taking what's there. I'll say more about it. But after the retreat, I went for a walk, an 8-day walk on the West Highland Way, beginning in Glasgow, Scotland. And it was an 8-day pilgrimage. It was meant to be a mythic pilgrimage. My grandmother was born in Glasgow. I really sort of cherish my Scottish roots. And so this pilgrimage, which I did alone, was a real challenge to do that alone, to go walking 160 kilometres by myself. But there were plenty of other people about. But nevertheless, it's about exploring my Scottish roots and working at it. Apart from the way, I went to Edinburgh Castle and I chased up in the War Museum there references to my great uncle Alexander Weir, who was my grandmother's brother, who died in the trenches in World War I, but who always for me has sort of been a kind of a slightly mythic character, because there was something written by one of his officers in the trenches about him and how he used to sit and read his Bible very, very calmly and quietly whilst the shells were falling around about. And for me, somehow as a kid, that really, really rang a bell about something about meaning and something about something worthwhile. So my father was called Alexander Weir Davies after his uncle Alexander Weir, and my name is Glenn Alexander Davies. So the name Alexander is important to me, and this man is important to me, and I made a point of finding out about him. So in another way, a kind of a myth. at that time then, I was a wanderer, and that was the myth I was living out. And in another way, I was kind of like a son returning home to my roots. Another kind of myth. So I think it's really, really useful to be able to sort of seek these kind of touchstones out in our lives. And it can really bring beauty. So the beauty of being in Scotland wasn't just a kind of a beauty of being in Scotland, but there was this whole sort of history and sense of something that was there that could be burrowed into. And I certainly did a lot of that at that time. So my parents came to live in Seal Rocks eventually from Newcastle, and they built the modest home that I'm now staying in, because when my mother died in 2009, I inherited it. So Seal Rocks is beautiful. There's no doubt about that. Okay, you saw the pictures. It's beautiful, but I can't just rest on the laurels of that. Yes, it's got the aquamarine water, the bay like a mill pond, paddle boarders, swimmers, dolphins cruising through, whales in the season. Then there are those cold leaden days with massive waves smashing through. And there's the mysterious underwater world, which I love to explore, the world, snorkeling, rays and wobbegongs, grey nurse sharks, turtles, all manner of beautiful fish in great gossamer sort of veils hanging in the water, and others just shooting through the kelp and the seagrass beds below. It's beautiful, but it's not something to be taken for granted. There's the deep forest of the national park, almost to the back door, alive with all manner of bird life, diamond pythons, goannas, possums, bandicoots, eastern spotted quolls. But again, it's kind of quite familiar, and it would be a shame just to allow it to be to be familiarly beautiful, because there's so much more that can be if I really, really practice with it. So I can't take it for granted. I can't take beauty for granted. And it's my practice here, living here, my Buddhist practice, to find in this familiar beauty a deeper truth, a mystery, an unknowableness, can't be pinned down, which can touch the depths of my depths within me, and the mystery and the unknowableness that I am. So these two can meet. With sampajanya, or applied interest, I don't just look out and take for granted, but I'm constantly sort of working to sort of see the deeper beauty here. Just as I work with my breath in meditation, and my body and my heart in meditation to unearth the deeper treasure, so I am working to unearth the treasure of this place, and it's part of my practice. And I had a bit of a revelation this morning, because it's also about trust. It's about openness. It's about vulnerability. If I can't be vulnerable and open, if I can't trust and let go and allow something to arise without me thinking that it's got anything to do with me whatsoever, if I can't do that, then nothing will arise. So the more I can trust, the more vulnerable I can be, the more open I can be, the more I can let go, the more I can experience beauty. And I think my practice, and I think our practice, if we boil it down, is very much to do with that. Allowing to arise what's there really, but often we don't see it because we get ourselves in the way. So these butcher birds I was talking about, look, they're so familiar. I know them so well. There are 6 of them at the moment. There've been a number of them, different ones over the years, but some come and some are born. And at the moment there are 2 young grey ones, juveniles, and 4 more adults. But they have their own characters. It's amazing how much you can get to know them. And yeah, their particular character traits, they're so familiar. And yet, really, if I really, really think about it, I'm just can sort of be putting over my little sort of shape of what they actually are and how cute and beautiful they are. But they escape my attempts to pin them down and explain them. And I wrote a poem, a shorter one than the last one. It's called Butcher Birds. Oracles of the dawn, mournful fluting, echoing distantly through Banksia and Tuckaroo, haunting pipes from the immensity of eucalypt. Heroes, gods of the bush, blithe spirits of freedom, pursuing their hidden ways amidst the shadowed leafiness. Then suddenly here they are, standing at my morning door, insistent, cajoling pleas, the small tribes soaring and diving for morsels of cheese. Black and white, rough and tumble, competition for my attention. Cute, clever, familiar. Then they're gone. So the myths that I live by, I remember before I came to live here, but I had this sort of vision of a saffron-robed monk sort of living and growing old here in Seal Rocks. And in a way, I've partially become that. I'm not a monk, of course, but the Dharma farer, the monk, the seeker, I'm certainly that. And that is one of my myths. Greta Garbo famously announced once, "I want to be alone." I don't particularly want to be alone, but it seems that I am alone. And so I see that also within me and within my life, and part of my myth is the myth of the hermit, the myth of the forest renunciant, living in the heart of the forest, practicing spiritually. There's the myth of the forest itself, so powerful in story and myth of our culture or cultures. The myth of the tree, the Bodhi tree, a kind of a fig, the Ficus religiosa. There are figs here. Trees just mean so much to me. And they mean more than just the fact they're a tree. They have this deep resonance with me. And then there's the myth of the ocean, the myth of the wide open spaces, the myth of purity, the myth of freedom, the myth of the journey, all a part of my life here in Seal Rocks. So, but just finally, it's not always easy. In fact, it's often not that easy. I do get lonely. And I do have to deal at times with all sorts of difficult mental and emotional states. It's been part of my history. And it's not always just sort of totally easygoing. But I work here and I work with that. One of the things I have to deal with is the fact that I can be quite selfish about this place. You know, you can easily fall into the idea that this is mine. This is my realm, my possession, and to hold tightly and seek comfort from it somehow, instead of rather a sense of adventure and openness and going out and letting go of it, letting it be. So the time will come, maybe sooner, maybe later, when it's time for me to move on from here. So my advancing age, obviously, will become more of an issue. It's not too bad now, of course, but it's going to be with everybody. It happens to everyone. But that's my life in Seal Rocks. That's who I am. That's who I'm trying to be. And that's hopefully gives you a bit of an idea of how I experience the beauty of this place. That's it.